This week, I will be doing quarantine recommendations of my favorite podcast of 2020 so far. So I absolutely love podcast and podcasting. Actually, one of my clients is a podcast production company, and so I spend a lot of time thinking about and working with and listening to podcasts during the day. It's something I love to have in my headphones as I'm doing all my tasks for the day. And there are a large handful, although I've tried to narrow it down a little bit, of shows that I listen to on a weekly basis that I get really excited when they get a new episode gets released, and I download them immediately. So I have kind of broken down my categories into true crime, of course, because true crime podcasting is huge, kind of like fun or just general podcast, personal growth, and then some business. So I'll give you my favorites of each of those categories and maybe tell you a little bit why I love them. First category, true crime. There is like no limit on how many true crime podcasts you can listen to, and I have listened to a lot, but there are a handful that I listen to on a regular basis. So none of these include like full season stories where they tell like one story like serial from beginning to end. These are ones that come out like on a weekly basis. So first is My Favorite Murder. It's arguably one of the largest podcasts out there, but Kieran and Georgia each week sit down and tell each other a true crime story. They are a true crime comedy podcast, so some weeks it's pretty funny. As part of their Exactly Right network, I have also become a fan of The Murder Squad with Paul Holes and Billy Jenson. And if you don't know, Paul Holes was one of the detectives who finally caught the Golden State Killer, massive serial killer for 2 decades. And Billy Jenson is a journalist who uses a lot of online crowdsourcing. So they kind of put their two abilities together and created a podcast, which is really awesome. And then my newest favorite true crime genre show is actually I Survived. So it's based on the TV show, but they're doing weekly episodes of different I Survived stories. So if you want something that's a little bit more empowering and less sad in the true crime world, that is a good option. Changing categories to something a lot more fun is my fun podcasts, like ones I just listen to just because I enjoy listening to the host. These ones I actually rotate pretty often, but 2 of my new favorite ones are Personology, where they talk about like one really interesting character of history. One week it was Theodore Roosevelt, another week it was Albert Einstein, and they kind of just dive into the personality and what made these, characters really, really unique. So that's a really fun one that I am greatly enjoying. Another one is Staying In with Emily and Kumail Nanjiani and his wife Emily, and they are doing this just purely during quarantine, but they have a really, really interesting conversations just amongst themselves. Each week is sort of about how they're handling things, and Emily is actually a trained therapist, while Kumail is obviously an actor and comedian, and so it's a really interesting conversation between the 2 of them. So I'm enjoying that Staying In podcast. And another new one that I've discovered and been listening to the last couple months is The Weirdest Things I Learned This Week. So it's usually 3 co-hosts, and they take a random piece of information that they've learned and they share it with one another, which really these sort of round table talk discussions are my favorite types of podcast. So that's the ones I tend to listen to. Switching categories again to the third category of just sort of personal growth, like things I listen to just to sort of fill me up and learn more about myself. There is Typology, which is an Enneagram podcast. And I am obsessed with Enneagram, and I'm an Enneagram 5, for those of you curious. And they just dive into each of the numbers, and you get to learn more about people and the numbers and a little bit more about yourself. Brene Brown also has a new podcast called Unlocking Us, which is really wonderful. If you know, she is an author and speaker and has done a lot of research in the area of shame. But she's just really motivational and someone who kind of helps us unlock ourselves. And she has a really great episode I listened to this week talking with someone who studied grief. And so kind of talking about grief through the pandemic. And so if you've watched my grief video that came out a couple weeks ago, I highly recommend this as an additional follow-up to that. And another just personal growth one is meditation minis. So these are really short 10-15 minute meditation episodes. So if you maybe use a meditation app, or maybe you haven't really gotten into one, I haven't really found one that I love, but I have found this podcast that I really like to listen to and do little mini meditation sessions. So those are my personal growth podcasts I listen to. And for the last category, I do want to mention some business related podcasts, although I actually do not listen to very many business related shows. I think for me, it's just a way to sort of learn about different things. So not that I haven't listened to different business ones, but I don't listen to them regularly. Having said that, there are a couple that I do recommend. So the first one I recommend is Make Money Blogging, and this is by Sharon Gorley. She is an Australian blogger, and I actually took her Make Money Blogging online course. So she is someone who in the blogging world I think is wonderful to learn from, and she teaches you a lot of skills, and her online course is absolutely amazing. So Make Money Blogging by Digital Nomad Wannabe, Sharon Gorley. And the last one is the Simple Pin podcast. These are really great. They're really bite-sized chunks of practical steps that you can actually take. Most episodes are only 15-20 minutes. So I can listen to them pretty quickly within one Pomodoro session, really, and learn a little bit more about Pinterest and marketing on Pinterest, since that is the main way that I market my blog and my YouTube channel. So those are some of my favorite podcasts of 2020. Again, so far, because it's only April, and so I'm sure by the end of the year, I will have found new ones. I'm always finding new ones I love, kind of rotating them in and out. But a lot of those I've stuck with for quite a while, or they're some of my new favorites. So that's it for quarantine edition of recommendations of favorite podcasts of 2020. Be sure to subscribe to not miss a new episode, and I will see you next week.